Cole Hargrove heard the baby before he saw it. A thin, reedy cry cutting through the Kansas wind, like something that had already given up on being answered. He pulled his horse to a stop in front of the Calloway place and looked at the porch. Nora was sitting in the dirt at the top of the steps, 2 years old, her nightgown soaked through from the morning dew, holding a bundle of cloth against her chest, the way her mother had taught her. The bundle was moving. She looked up at Cole with her mother's brown eyes and said the only word she knew how to say anymore. Mama. And Cole Hargrove, a man who had buried his own family 6 years ago and sworn he was finished with the world, got off his horse. If this story reaches something inside you that you thought was gone, stay with me until the very end. Subscribe to this channel, hit that bell, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The summer of 1883 had no mercy in it. That was the first thing people said about the season in Caldwell, Kansas, the way they said it every year, but this year they meant it differently. This year the creek ran so low you could step across it without wetting your boot tops. This year the wheat on the south fields turned color too early, and the cattle along Harlan Wess's fence lines stood still as grave markers in the heat. Ruth Calloway died on a Tuesday morning 3 days after her son came into the world. The boy came early and hard, the way difficult things tend to arrive, and Ruth had bled through the night, with Nell Dawes beside her, doing everything a woman with 68 years of midwifing experience could do. Which was considerable, which was not enough. She died just after sunrise. The baby lived. Nell had wrapped the boy in the cleanest cloth she had and laid him in the wooden crate that had served as Nora's first bed 2 years before. Then she had sat down in Ruth Calloway's kitchen and pressed her hands flat on the table and breathed the way she breathed when she was keeping herself from doing something inadvisable, like weeping or going to find Harlan Wess and saying directly to his face what she believed he had done. She had not gone to find Wess. She had stayed through the morning and into the afternoon, feeding the boy with milk she'd coaxed from the neighbor's goat, watching Nora, who sat at the kitchen door and looked out at the yard, the way a child looks at a place where something important used to be and isn't anymore. By the second day, Nell knew she couldn't stay. Her own place was 7 miles east, and she had 3 other women in the county who were close to their time. She had left everything in order. She had left a note on the kitchen table written in her large, precise hand that said, "These children need someone." If you are reading this, and you are not that someone, find who is. Nobody came. On the 3rd morning, Nora had carried her brother to the porch, the way she had seen her mother carry him. She was 2 years old. She sat down in the dirt at the top of the steps and held him against her chest because that was the only thing she knew to do, and she waited for someone to tell her what came next. Cole Hargrove was not supposed to be on that road. He was supposed to be 6 miles north picking up wire from the Henderson Supply Depot and riding straight back to his place without stopping, without talking to anyone. He didn't have to, without looking sideways at anything that wasn't his direct concern. That was the arrangement he had made with himself 4 years ago when he settled outside Caldwell, and it had suited him fine. He had a tidy operation, small garden, 12 head of cattle, a dog named Grim, who had opinions about most things and expressed them freely. He did not need anything else, and he had made a study of not wanting it. He had taken the southern road by accident, or by whatever you called it, when a man's horse chose a direction at a fork, and the man didn't correct her because he was thinking about something else. He heard the baby before the farmhouse came into view. He pulled his horse up and sat still and listened. The cry was thin and high and had a particular quality to it, the quality of something that had been going on for a while and was getting quieter, not because the situation had improved, but because the sound was running out of strength to make itself. Cole knew that sound. He had heard it once before in his life, and he had not been able to do anything about it then, and he had carried that particular helplessness around with him like a stone in his coat pocket ever since. He turned his horse down the Calloway lane without deciding to. Nora looked up at him when he stopped. She did not look frightened. She looked like a child who had exhausted fear and come out the other side of it into something quieter and more patient. Her nightgown was damp. Her hair was loose and tangled, and she had both arms wrapped around the bundle of cloth in her lap. The bundle moved. A small sound came out of it, weaker than what Cole had heard from the road. He got down from the horse slowly. He crouched at the bottom of the porch steps so that his face was level with hers. Grim padded up beside him and sat down, which was Grim's way of indicating that the situation required presence. "Hey there," Cole said. Nora looked at him. Then she looked at the bundle in her arms. Then she looked back at him and said, "Mama." Cole took his hat off. He held it in both hands and looked at the little girl and the baby and the closed door of the house behind them. And he put certain things together, the way a man puts things together when he has been a Pinkerton detective for 15 years and has learned to read the shape of a situation before anyone tells him what it is. "Where's your mama?" he said. Nora looked at the door. "Mama sleep," she said. But the way she said it, the particular flatness of it, told him she had been saying it for 2 days without fully believing it. He stood up. He knocked on the door. No answer. He pushed it open. The house was quiet in the particular way that houses go quiet after someone has died in them. Not empty. Not peaceful. Just still in a way that pressed against you when you walked in. He came back out 2 minutes later. He crouched down in front of Nora again. "Can I hold him?" he said. He meant the baby. Nora considered this with the seriousness of a 2-year-old who has been in sole charge of something important and is not sure about relinquishing authority. Then she held the bundle out to him with both arms, the way her mother had showed her, careful and straight. Cole took the boy. He weighed almost nothing. His face was red and scrunched, and his mouth was working at the air without making sound anymore. Cole put 2 fingers against the side of the boy's neck and felt the pulse faint but steady, the way a candle flame is steady when there's almost no wick left. "When did he eat last?" Cole asked. Nora thought about it. "Nellie give milk," she said. "Nellie go." So there had been someone here. Someone had known. Someone had left. Cole stood up with the baby and looked out at the empty road. He looked at his horse. He looked at Nora in her damp nightgown, with the dirt on her knees, and her mother's brown eyes watching him with an attention that no 2-year-old should have to have developed this quickly. "All right," he said. He said it the way you say a thing when you've just made a decision that is going to cost you something, and you've decided to stop thinking about the cost. "All right. Come on then." Nora stood up. She reached up and took hold of 2 fingers of his free hand. The hand that wasn't holding her brother with the matter-of-fact certainty of someone who has identified the available resource and is using it. They walked to the horse together. Getting a 2-year-old and a newborn onto a horse with one adult and a concerned dog was not simple. Cole managed it. He got Nora up first, sitting in front of the saddle, and he showed her how to hold the horn and told her to keep holding it no matter what, and she did with both hands, knuckles white, solemn as a church elder. He tucked the baby against his chest inside his coat. The boy's small face turned toward his heartbeat, the way newborns turn toward warmth, and he mounted behind Nora and clicked his tongue at the mare. "Grim," he said. Grim fell in beside the horse without needing further instruction. They were a 1/4 mile down the road when Cole realized he did not know the baby's name. He thought about asking Nora, but decided against it. Nora had enough to carry. He rode north toward his property and thought about Nell Dawes. Nell Dawes was the only midwife in 3 counties, and she had delivered half the children in this part of Kansas, including, he was fairly certain, both of the children he was currently transporting. If anyone knew what had happened in that house in the last 4 days, it was Nell. And if anyone knew what Harlan West had to do with the Calloway family situation, it was also Nell, because Nell Dawes had been paying close attention to what Harlan West did in this county for longer than most people had the nerve to. He reached his property around mid-morning. He got Nora down from the horse and set her on the porch and handed her a piece of hardtack from his coat pocket, and she ate it with the focused efficiency of a child who has been genuinely hungry and is not taking food for granted. He carried the baby inside. The boy needed milk and warmth, and someone who knew what they were doing more than Cole did. The milk he could handle in a limited way. He had a goat, a fact he had not anticipated being grateful for until this exact moment. The warmth he could handle. The someone who knew what they were doing was the problem. He settled the baby in a padded crate near the stove and went back outside to find Nora eating her hardtack and looking at Grim, who was looking back at her with the dignified wariness of a dog meeting a very small person of unknown temperament. "He's friendly," Cole said. Nora held out a piece of hardtack to Grim. Grim took it delicately. A negotiation was concluded. Nora slid off the porch step and sat down in the dirt next to the dog with the instinctive confidence of a child who has decided that the dog is trustworthy, and began to explain something to him in a language that was mostly her own. Cole watched them for a moment. Then he went inside, wrote a note, and sent it 7 miles east with the fastest thing he had, which was the boy from the Henderson place, who sometimes did odd jobs for him, and who could ride like he was trying to leave his own shadow behind. The note said, "Nell, Callaway children are at my place. Newborn needs help. Come when you can. Come sooner." He signed it with his name. Nell Dawes arrived 4 hours later in a wagon she drove herself, which was the only way she drove anything. She came through the gate at a pace that suggested urgency without suggesting panic, which was characteristic of Nell, who had decided decades ago that panic was a luxury she couldn't afford in her line of work. She pulled up in the yard, set the brake, looked at Cole standing on the porch, and looked at Nora sitting in the dirt with the dog. "The boy," she said. "Inside," Cole said. "He ate twice from the goat. I don't know if I'm doing it right." "You probably aren't," Nell said, and got down from the wagon. She went past Cole into the house without ceremony, and he heard her moving in there. Low, efficient sounds, the particular quality of motion that belongs to someone who knows exactly what they're doing and has no time for anything extra. He came in after a minute. She was bent over the crate, her one good eye closed. Her hands moving over the boy with the light reading touch of someone who has examined 1,000 newborns and knows what she's feeling for. "He's thin," she said. "He's 3 days old," Cole said, "and he's had a rough 3 days." "His name is Henry," Nell said. She did not look up. "Ruth decided on Henry 2 weeks before. She told me." A pause. "She told me a number of things 2 weeks before." Cole waited. Nell straightened up. She looked at him with her one working eye, which had a quality of vision that made most people feel like she was seeing 2 or 3 things simultaneously, the surface thing and the thing underneath it. "Sit down," she said. "I'm fine standing." "Sit down anyway. You need to hear this right." He sat. Nell pulled the other chair close and sat across from him. She folded her hands on her knees. She had hands that had delivered something close to 400 children in 40 years, and they were the hands of someone who had made a great many decisions in moments when no one else was equipped to make them. "Harlan West loaned Daniel Callaway money 3 years ago," she said. $200 against the farm. Daniel signed a paper. Ruth told me she read the paper before he signed it, and the paper said if they defaulted on the loan, the land reverted to Wes. She said the repayment terms were manageable. She said she calculated it herself. "And," Cole said, "and Daniel died 8 months ago. Fever." Ruth was already carrying Henry by then. Nell's jaw tightened slightly. After Daniel died, Ruth went to Wes to discuss the terms. He showed her the loan paper. Cole, the terms on that paper were not the terms Ruth remembered. The repayment schedule had been changed. The interest rate had been changed. The default clause had been expanded. Ruth said she didn't recognize half of what was written. "A forged contract," Cole said. "I believe so. Ruth believed so. She told me she had the original paper, the one she actually watched Daniel sign, the one with the real terms on it." Nell looked at him steadily. "She hid it," She told me where she hid it. She told me 2 weeks before Henry was born because she said she wanted someone to know in case something happened to her. The room was very quiet. She died in childbirth, Cole said carefully. Yes, Nell said. She did. She let that sit for a moment. I don't know that it was anything other than what it was. Childbirth is dangerous. Ruth was not strong. Henry came early. These things happen. She looked at her hands. I also know that Wes sent a man to that house 4 days ago, the day before Ruth went into labor. I know because the neighbor woman on the east side saw the man ride up and saw Ruth open the door and saw the door close. She doesn't know what was said. She didn't think it was her business. Nothing's anybody's business in this county until it's too late, Cole said. No, Nell agreed. It isn't. She looked up. Ruth hid the original contract the night that man came to her door. She was 8 months along and frightened, and she hid it somewhere, and then she went into labor the next morning, and she never came back out of it. Nell paused. I know she hid it. I don't know where. She told me where she planned to hide it before that man came. Whether she actually managed to put it there before the labor started, I can't tell you. Where did she plan to put it? Cole asked. Nell looked at him for a long moment. In Nora's rag doll, the one she made herself. Brown hair, red dress stuffed with cotton. It's in that house somewhere. She paused. Or it was. Wes's men have been back to the house. I expect so, yes. Cole stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the yard at Nora still sitting in the dirt with Grim talking to the dog in her private language, the Kansas afternoon light going long and gold around both of them. She knew, he said. It was not a question. Ruth. Yes, she knew she was in danger. She knew what Wes wanted. Nell's voice stayed level, but the levelness was the controlled kind, the kind built over a long life out of the decision to be useful rather than to fall apart. She asked me something, Cole, 2 weeks before. She asked me if she didn't make it through the birth if her children would have someone. Nell paused. I told her I would see to it. I meant it when I said it. I was not fast enough. Cole turned from the window. He looked at Nell. The doll, he said. Is it worth the risk of going back there for it? Nell looked at him steadily. Without that contract, Harlan Wes owns that farm the moment the paperwork clears the county clerk's office. Those children are orphans with no property and no claim. With that contract, Wes is exposed as a fraud in a federal court, and those children have land that belongs to them, and a case that could bring down half of what Wes has built in this county in the last 10 years. She folded her hands. Yes, she said. It's worth the risk. Outside, Nora laughed. A short, genuine 2-year-old sound. Grim had apparently done something amusing. Cole could hear it through the window glass, that laugh, and it was the most specific sound he had heard in a long time. Not background. Not the world moving around him the way it had moved around him for 4 years while he stood still in the middle of it. This. He put on his hat. You'll stay with them, he said to Nell. It was not a question. Obviously, Nell said. Don't get yourself shot before you find the doll. I'll do my best, Cole said. Cole. He stopped at the door. Nell was looking at him with her one good eye, and the expression on her face was the kind that gets there when someone has been measuring a person for a while and has just finished measuring. Ruth was right to be scared, she said. But she was also right to hide what she hid and put it somewhere she believed would be safe. A pause. She hid the most important thing she had with her children, in the thing her daughter loved most. Another pause. That's not an accident. That's a mother who knew exactly what she was doing. Cole looked at her for a moment. Then he went out. He rode back down to the Calloway place as the afternoon went long and thin, the sun dropping toward the flat line of the western horizon and throwing everything into that particular Kansas gold that made even hard things look momentarily beautiful. The house was quiet when he got there. The front door was still open the way he'd left it. He went in and stood still for a moment listening. The particular kind of listening that 15 years of detective work had built into him, not just ears, but the whole body feeling for wrongness in the air, for the weight of presence in a place that should be empty. The house was empty. He moved through the rooms, the kitchen, the small bedroom where Ruth's quilts were still folded back on the bed, the second room where Nora's little cot sat against the wall, and where the wooden crate that had been Henry's first bed was pushed under the window. No doll. He looked under the cot, behind the crate. On the shelf above the cot, where Nora's few things were arranged with the careful order of a mother who wanted her daughter to be able to find things without help. No doll. He stood in the middle of the room and thought. Wes's men had been here. If they'd found a doll stuffed with documents, this would already be finished, and not in a direction that helped anyone. So either they hadn't found it, or Ruth hadn't managed to put it there before she went into labor. He went back to the kitchen and looked at the table. The note Nell had left was gone. Someone had taken it. He filed that away. He looked at the hooks by the door where Ruth's things hung. Her coat, her apron, her Sunday hat. And below the hooks on the floor, pushed against the baseboard, a small worn traveling bag. He crouched and opened it. Inside was a nightgown, folded small, a comb, a small leather purse, a photograph of a man and a woman on their wedding day. And at the bottom, wrapped in a pillowcase, a rag doll with brown yarn hair and a red calico dress, hand-sewn, stuffed full. He held it for a moment. He pressed it between his hands. He could feel just barely something flat and stiff inside the cotton stuffing near the doll's midsection. Not cotton. Paper, folded small and tight. He did not open it there. He put the doll inside his coat, stood up, and walked out of the Calloway house without looking back at the room where Ruth had died. He had looked at enough rooms like that in his life. He knew what they did to a man if he let them. He was halfway to his horse when he heard the rider, coming up the Calloway lane at a pace that was not leisurely. One horse moving with purpose. Cole stepped to the side of the house and waited. Deputy Seth Pike rode into the yard and pulled up. He was a big man, broad through the shoulders, with a face that had the kind of structure that looked permanently suspicious, even when it wasn't, which was most of the time, but not always. He looked around the yard. He looked at Cole's horse tied at the fence. "Callahan," he said. Then he looked at Cole. "Sorry. Hargrove." "Pike," Cole said. "You were here this morning," Pike said. It was not a question. "Greer at the feed store said he saw you ride this direction." "I was," Cole said. "Where are the children?" "Somewhere safe." Pike looked at him with that face that looked permanently suspicious. "Mr. Wes has expressed concern for the welfare of those children," he said. "Given that their mother has passed, it falls to the county to determine their placement. There's a children's home in—" "I know where the children's home is," Cole said, "and I know who funds it." Pike stopped. Something moved behind his eyes that wasn't quite comfortable. "Mr. Wes supports a number of charitable—" Seth. Cole said his first name the way you say it when you want a man to drop the official language for a moment and use his actual brain. "You've been a deputy in this county for 6 years. You know things about Harlan Wes that aren't in any document. You know what kind of man he is and the gaps between the things he does publicly." Pike's jaw tightened. "Those are orphaned children," Cole said. 3 days old and 2 years. Their mother is 3 days dead, and the first person who comes to inquire about their welfare is a deputy who rode out here on Harlan Wes's behalf. You tell me that sits right with you." A long silence. "I ride out here on the county's behalf," Pike said, but the certainty in it had gone slightly soft at the edges. "Do you?" Cole said. He let it sit. "Then tell me something. Who told you the children were unattended?" Pike looked at the house, looked back at Cole. "Wes mentioned he'd heard—" "Wes told you," Cole said. "Not the county. Wes told you and you rode out here, which means either you're doing his work or you genuinely believe you're doing the county's work, and haven't thought hard about why those two things have started to look the same. He paused. "I rode this road by accident this morning, Seth. I heard that baby crying from the road. Nobody in this town sent me. Nobody in this town came at all." Pike looked at him for a long moment. "Where are they?" he said again. His voice had changed. "Not a great deal. Enough." "Somewhere they're being fed and kept warm," Cole said, "which is more than they had 4 hours ago." Another silence. Pike looked at the house. He looked at the lane behind him. He looked at Cole. "I need to make a report," he said. "Make whatever report you need to make," Cole said. "But I'd suggest you think carefully about who you're making it to and what it gets used for." He stepped to his horse and untied the reins. "I'll be at my place North Road if the county needs to find me for any legitimate reason." He swung up into the saddle. "Good afternoon, Seth." He rode out without looking back. He was a mile down the road before he reached into his coat and pressed his hand against the doll to confirm it was still there. It was. He rode north with the Kansas evening spreading out wide and orange on all sides of him, and thought about Ruth Calloway, who had been 8 months pregnant and frightened in her own house, when a man came to her door and who had managed in the dark hours before her labor started to put the most important thing she owned inside the thing her daughter loved most. That was not a small thing. That was the clearest act of courage he had seen in a long time, and he had seen a number of them. He rode north toward the cabin, toward Nell, toward Nora, and the boy with no official name yet. And he pressed one hand against his coat where the doll was, and he thought, "Not yet, Ruth. Not yet." Harlan West had not won this. Not while Cole had breath in his body, and that doll inside his coat, and Nell Dawes 7 miles east, knowing what she knew. Not yet. Cole got back to the cabin as the last of the daylight was pulling itself off the land. He could hear Nora before he reached the porch, not crying, talking the steady low murmur of a 2-year-old narrating something to an audience that may or may not have been listening. He tied the horse and went inside and found Nell at the stove with Henry, in the crook of her left arm, feeding him from a small cloth soaked in goat's milk, and Nora sitting on the floor beside Grim, explaining something at length and with great seriousness to the dog's left ear. Nell looked up when he came in. Her eye went straight to his coat. "You found it," she said. "I found it." He reached inside and set the rag doll on the table. Nell handed Henry to Cole without asking whether Cole wanted to hold him, which was characteristic of Nell. She crossed to the table and picked up the doll and held it in both hands, and pressed it the same way Cole had pressed it on the road, feeling through the cotton stuffing for the shape of what was inside. "Here," she said. She put her finger on the doll's midsection. "Feel that?" "I already felt it on the road." "Then you know." She set the doll on the table and looked at it for a moment. "We should open it carefully. Whatever Ruth wrote or hid in there, we need it intact." "We're not opening it tonight," Cole said. Nell looked at him. "Pike will report back to West tonight," Cole said. "Whatever West decides to do about it, he'll do it before morning. I want to know what's in that doll, but I want to know it somewhere that isn't here with someone present who has the legal standing to act on it." He looked at the doll. "We open it in the wrong place, in front of the wrong people, and it disappears. Ruth didn't keep that paper safe for 3 years, so we could lose it, because we were in a hurry." Nell was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Who do you have in mind?" "Elias Croft," Cole said. "He retired from the federal circuit 2 years ago, but he still holds his commission. His farm is 40 miles south outside Newton. Anything he witnesses, anything he signs carries federal weight." "You know Elias Croft?" "I know him." Nell looked at him the way she looked at things she was deciding whether to push on. She decided not to. 40 miles, she said. "With a newborn and a 2-year-old. "Not tonight," Cole said. "Tonight we stay here. We keep the lights low. And we don't open the door for anyone who doesn't announce themselves as someone I know." He looked at Nora, who had stopped explaining things to Grim, and was now watching Cole hold her brother with the focused attention of someone conducting a quality assessment. "Tomorrow morning early, Before Wes has time to organize whatever he's planning to organize, we move. Nora stood up and walked to Cole and looked up at Henry in his arms. She reached out and put one hand very gently on top of the boy's head, the way she had seen her mother do it. Then she looked up at Cole. "Henry sleep," she said. "He does a lot of that," Cole agreed. "Henry hungry," Nora said. "We're working on that." "I hungry too," Nora said, with the clear implication that this was the more pressing matter. Nell made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was adjacent to one, and went back to the stove. They ate without talking much, which was fine, because the silence between the four of them, 3 adults and a 2-year-old and a newborn who slept through most of it, had a quality that was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of people in the middle of something who have agreed without saying so to save their words for when they need them. After Nora was asleep, her small body curled on Cole's cot, with Grim settled on the floor beside her like a self-appointed guard. Cole and Nell sat at the kitchen table with the rag doll between them and the lamp turned low. "Tell me what else Ruth told you," Cole said. "All of it." Nell folded her hands. "She told me Wes had been pressuring Daniel for 3 years before Daniel died. Told me Daniel was a proud man who didn't ask for help and didn't tell Ruth the full extent of what the loan had become until it was too late to do much about it." She paused. "She told me Wes had a man, his land agent, a man named Briggs. Briggs was the one who brought the paperwork. Briggs was the one who sat at that kitchen table and watched Daniel Calloway sign his name to something he believed said one thing and actually said another." "Is Briggs still in Caldwell?" Cole asked. "He is. He runs Wes's property office on the main street." Nell looked at her hands. "Ruth told me something else. She told me she had spoken to Reverend Gaines about what was happening, about the loan, about the discrepancy in the terms, about what she suspected." She stopped. Cole waited. "Gaines told her he would look into it," Nell said. "That was 6 months ago. He has not spoken to her since, and 3 weeks after she went to him, Wes donated $500 to the church building fund." Her voice carried no particular drama. It did not need to. Ruth understood what that meant. "She was alone in it," Cole said. "She was alone in it," Nell agreed. "With 2 children and a dead husband and a farm that was going to be taken from her the moment the paperwork cleared." A pause. "She wasn't a woman who gave up easily. She kept that original contract. She kept it safe. She was trying to find someone who would listen to her long enough to look at it." Nell's jaw moved. She ran out of time. The lamp between them burned low and steady. Outside, the Kansas night was quiet in the way it goes quiet in summer, not empty, just full of small sounds that belonged there: the grass, the wind, the occasional shift of the horse in the lean-to. "There's something else," Nell said. Cole looked at her. "When I was with Ruth in the last hours, she was lucid for a while. More lucid than I expected." Nell's voice was controlled the way it was controlled when she was working hard to keep it that way. "She asked me if Nora would remember her. I told her yes. Children remember more than we think." She paused. "She asked me to tell Nora something when she was old enough to understand it. She said tell her I was not afraid at the end. Tell her I made sure." Nell stopped. "I think she meant the doll. I think she meant she got to it before the labor took her. She needed someone to know she'd managed it." Cole looked at the rag doll on the table between them. A woman who had known she might not survive the night had dragged herself to hide a piece of paper inside her daughter's toy so that the truth would outlast her. He had seen a great many things in 15 years of detective work. He had seen courage in a number of forms. He was adding this one to the list. "Get some sleep," he said to Nell. "I'll take the first watch." "You were up before dawn," Nell said. "I don't sleep much anyway," Cole said. "Never have." Nell looked at him. "Your family," she said. It was not a question exactly, more like an acknowledgement that she knew the shape of the thing and was not going to pry at it, but was not going to pretend she didn't see it either. 6 years ago, Cole said. Wife, boy, fever took them both inside a week. He said it the way you say something you have said to yourself so many times that the words have worn smooth. I came out here because I needed somewhere to be that wasn't anywhere I'd been before. And then you turned down the wrong road this morning, Nell said. And then I turned down the wrong road, Cole said. Nell stood up and pushed her chair back. She was quiet for a moment, standing at the table looking at the rag doll. Then she said, Cole, that boy in there doesn't have a name yet. Not officially. I know. Ruth decided on Henry, but it's not in any record. There's no document. He was born in that house with no witness but me and God, and his mother died before she could file anything at the county clerk's office. She looked at him. If Wes gets his hands on that child before we get to Croft, he can put him in whatever county institution he chooses, and there's no paper anywhere that says different. Cole was quiet. He needs a name on record, Nell said. He needs it before we walk into any courthouse or any judge's presence, because a named child with a named guardian has a claim. An unnamed infant with no documentation is just a problem to be managed. She picked up the lamp. Think about that while you're keeping watch. She went to the back room. Cole sat alone at the table, with the rag doll and the low light, and the sound of Nora breathing from the other room, and the boy making the small sounds that newborns make when they are mostly asleep and mostly fed, and the world has not yet fully registered as a place that requires vigilance. He sat there for a long time. Somewhere around midnight, he heard a horse on the north road, not coming to the cabin, passing it, moving south at a pace that was deliberate but not rushed. He went to the window and looked out. One rider lantern dark moving in the direction of town. He watched until the sound faded, and then he stood at the window for a while longer, thinking about Seth Pike, about the look that had been on Pike's face when Cole had said what he'd said in the Callaway yard. Not the look of a man who had been caught. The look of a man who had just heard something he had not let himself think about and was now unable to stop thinking about it. He had seen that look before. It meant something. He was not sure yet what it meant in Pike's specific case. He went back to the table and sat down and put his hand on the rag doll and left it there. In the morning, Nora woke before anyone else. Cole heard her the moment she stirred, which was how it had been since she'd arrived. He was not sleeping deeply enough to miss anything. He was in the doorway of the back room before she was fully upright, and she looked at him with her mother's eyes brown and direct, doing the rapid morning assessment of a 2-year-old, establishing where she was and who was present and whether the situation was acceptable. She looked at Grim, who raised his head from the floor beside the cot. She looked at Cole. She looked at the other side of the cot, where the wooden crate that held Henry was positioned against the wall. "Henry okay?" she said. "Henry's okay," Cole said. "He ate an hour ago." "Henry sleep again," she said, with a tone that suggested she found her brother's sleep schedule somewhat excessive. "He's 3 days old," Cole said. "He's allowed." Nora considered this and apparently decided it was a reasonable policy. She slid off the cot and padded out to the kitchen in her bare feet and stood in front of the cold stove and looked at Cole with the clear expectation of someone who believed that food was a reasonable next agenda item. Cole made cornmeal mush, which was not what either of them would have chosen under other circumstances, but which Nora ate with the same focused efficiency she had applied to the hardtack the day before. Cole sat across from her and drank coffee and watched her eat and thought about what Nell had said about names and documents and the particular vulnerability of a child who existed in the gap between what was true and what was recorded. Nell came out of the back room at first light carrying Henry, who was awake and conducting his small, serious business of existing. She sat down at the table and looked at Cole. "You didn't sleep," she said. "I told you I don't." "You told me. I had hoped you were exaggerating." She looked at Nora. "Good morning, Nora." "Morning, Nellie," Nora said without looking up from her mush. Nell looked at Cole over the top of Nora's head. "We need to move this morning," she said low. "I heard a horse on the road around midnight going south toward town. If that was Pike reporting back." "It was Pike," Cole said. I saw him. Then Wes knows you have them and knows where. She shifted Henry in her arms. He'll send someone by mid-morning. I know, Cole said. We leave in an hour. 40 miles to Newton, Nell said. With him. She meant Henry. There are things that can go wrong with a newborn on a long road that I don't need to explain to you. I know what can go wrong, Cole said. Then you understand why I'm not telling you this casually. I understand, he said. He looked at Henry in Nell's arms. The boy was awake, his eyes unfocused, the way newborn eyes are unfocused, taking in light and shape without yet being able to do much with either. He had Ruth's coloring, which Cole could see even at 3 days old, the dark hair, the particular set of the jaw. His name is Henry Daniel Calloway, Cole said. Henry for what Ruth decided Daniel for his father. I'll say so in front of Croft, and I'll put it in any document Croft asks me to sign. Nell looked at him for a moment. You understand what that means, she said. If you put your name to a document claiming guardianship of these children before a federal officer, I understand what it means, Cole said. It means you're not handing them to anyone after this, Nell said. Not the county home, not a relative who might appear, not anyone who shows up with a piece of paper saying they have a better claim. You'd be their guardian of record, legally and otherwise. Cole looked at Nora, who had finished her mush and was now engaged in a conversation with Grimm about something that appeared to involve pointing at the door repeatedly. He looked at Henry. He looked at Nell. I know what it means, he said. Get them ready to travel. They were packed and moving within the hour. Cole put Nora up on the mare in front of him, the same position as the day before, and she took hold of the saddle horn with both hands, without being told which told him she had been thinking about it since yesterday, and had concluded that this was the correct protocol. Nell drove her own wagon with Henry and the padded crate beside her on the bench wrapped tight, the ragdoll tucked in beside him, because Nora had insisted on it with a firmness that did not leave room for discussion. They went east first, away from the Caldwell Road, following a fence line that Cole knew from 2 years of riding this land in every direction. He kept them off every main road they crossed. Nell followed him without comment, which was its own kind of trust. They were 3 miles out when Nora said, "Man coming." Cole looked up. She was right. A rider coming across the open ground from the north at an angle that was not casual, not someone taking a morning ride. Coming directly for them, which meant he had seen them, which meant someone had been watching the cabin already. Cole's hand went to his rifle. He did not raise it. He held the reins steady and watched the rider come. Beside him in the wagon, Nell said nothing. He could feel her stillness from 10 feet away. The rider got close enough to see his face, and Cole recognized him and felt a complicated thing move through his chest that was not quite relief and not quite wariness, but something that contained elements of both. Seth Pike pulled his horse up 15 feet away. He was not in his deputy's coat. He was dressed plain, like a man who had decided to go somewhere on his own time and had made that decision clear by what he was wearing. He looked at Cole. He looked at Nell and the wagon. He looked at Nora sitting in front of Cole on the mare. He held up one hand, palm out. "I'm alone," he said. "I see that," Cole said. "I'm not here on Wes's behalf," Pike said. "I want to be clear about that before anything else." Cole waited. Pike reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper and held it out. "That's the report I was supposed to file last night," he said. "I didn't file it. I spent most of the night deciding whether I was going to." He kept holding the paper out until Cole leaned forward and took it. "There's an addition at the bottom in my hand. What Wes told me this morning when I went to him. What he told me to do about those children." He paused. "Read that part carefully, specifically the part where he says he isn't particular about condition." Cole unfolded the paper. He read Pike's handwriting at the bottom 4 lines, the words plain and precise and damning, in the way that words written down by the person who heard them tend to be. He folded the paper and put it in his coat. "Seth," he said, I know, Pike said. He looked out across the flat land to the east, then back. I've been telling myself Wes was just a hard businessman, that the things I heard and didn't ask about were things that weren't my business. His jaw worked. That's a thing a man can believe for a long time if he doesn't look directly at it. He looked at Nora on the horse in front of Cole. Then you look directly at it. He put his horse sideways across the road ahead of them, but not to block them. The other direction, facing south. There's a farm track 2 miles east that runs along the back of the Hadley property, he said. Wes doesn't watch it because he thinks there's nothing on it worth watching. It comes out on the southern road 12 miles ahead of where you'd come out if you went the main way. He looked at Cole. Adds an hour. Saves you everything else. Cole looked at him. Why? He said. Not suspiciously. He genuinely wanted to know. Pike was quiet for a moment. Because I've been a lawman in this county for 6 years, he said, and the only person who has looked at those children and gone toward them instead of around them is a man with no legal obligation to do it. He looked at his hands on the reins. That's a thing a man ought to think about. He looked up. Go south Hargrove. I'll keep Wes's men off the main road as long as I can. That's all I can promise you. Cole looked at him for a long moment. Then he put his hat back on. We'll be at Elias Croft's farm south of Newton by tonight, he said. Whatever you're willing to put in writing about what Wes told you this morning, Croft's the man to put it in front of. Pike nodded once. He turned his horse and rode north without looking back, and Cole watched him go and thought about the particular kind of courage that is not the dramatic kind, the kind that happens quietly in the dark when a man stops pretending he doesn't see what he sees. Was that wise? Nell said from the wagon. I don't know yet, Cole said honestly. But he's right about the farm track. He touched his heels to the mare. Let's go. Nora looked up at him as the mare started forward. Where are we going? She asked. Cole looked at the flat eastern horizon opening up ahead of them. Somewhere safe, he said. Nora considered this. Then she looked back down at the saddle horn and tightened her hands on it because she had decided that was the correct protocol. And she was not a child who abandoned correct protocol once she had established it. They rode east into the morning light, and behind them, in Caldwell, Harlan Wes's men were already saddling horses and being given instructions that Seth Pike was already working to slow down. And 40 miles south, an old retired judge was sitting on his porch reading a book and did not yet know that by nightfall he was going to have the most important visitors he'd received in 2 years riding through his gate with a rag doll and a wooden box of evidence, and 2 children who had no one left in the world but the people who had chosen them. The farm track Pike had described was exactly what he'd said. It was 2 ruts through dry grass that looked like nothing from a distance and led somewhere from up close. Cole kept the mare at an easy walk, and Nell kept the wagon behind him, and they moved south through the mid-morning heat without talking, which was fine because everyone in the party had enough to think about. Nora fell asleep against Cole's chest, somewhere around the 2nd mile, which he had not expected, and which made riding considerably more complicated because he had to keep one arm around her and handle the reins with the other, while also listening for the sound of riders behind them. He managed it. He had managed harder things with less sleep, though not recently. Henry was quiet in the wagon. Nell had fed him before they left, and he was doing what he did best, which was sleeping with the absolute commitment of a creature that had only been in the world for 4 days and was still deciding how much of it to engage with. Cole thought about the paper in his coat, Pike's handwriting at the bottom 4 lines. He isn't particular about condition. That was what Wes had said about the children according to Pike's account. Not the children's welfare, not the children's placement. Their condition. Like they were cargo. Like the question of their survival was a variable he could adjust depending on what was convenient. Cole had known men like Wes. He had spent 15 years tracking them, building cases against them, sitting across from them in rooms where they smiled and spoke in the careful language of men who had decided the law was a tool they owned rather than a structure they lived inside. He knew exactly what not particular about condition meant from a man like that, and it had settled into his chest sometime in the night and not moved since. He pressed his arm a little tighter around Nora. She shifted in her sleep, made a small sound, and went still again. They stopped once midway through the morning to let the horses drink from a stock tank at the edge of a fallow field. Cole got Nora down, and she woke up enough to stand on her own feet and look around at the flatland, with the vague philosophical expression of a 2-year-old processing her situation. He handed her water in his hat, which she drank from with the seriousness of someone doing important work. "She's something," Nell said from the wagon. She was feeding Henry from the cloth, her eye on the horizon behind them. "She is," Cole said. "She hasn't cried once," Nell said. "Not since you found her. Not when you took her from that porch. Not when you rode her to your cabin. Not this morning." "I know." "Children cry," Nell said. "Especially when they're scared and hungry and they've lost their mother. It's what they do." She looked at Nora. "She's not doing that." "No," Cole said. "Her mother was the same way," Nell said. "Ruth didn't cry either. Not where anyone could see it." She looked out at the horizon again. "I think Nora understands more than we're accounting for. About what's happening. About why we're moving fast." Cole looked at Nora, who had put his hat back on his head, slightly crooked, and was now inspecting a grasshopper on the fence rail with complete focus. "I think you're right," he said. "That's going to matter," Nell said. "Before this is done." They moved on. The farm track came out onto the southern road around noon, exactly where Pike had said it would, and Cole pulled up and spent a full minute looking both directions before he brought the mare onto the pavement. Nothing moving in either direction as far as he could see. He touched his heels to the horse, and they went south. It was another 20 miles to Newton, and Cole did not let himself stop watching. He watched every tree line they passed, every rise in the road, every gap between fence posts, where a man on a horse could sit still and be missed at a glance. 15 years of that kind of watching had made it automatic, something that ran in the background of everything else, like breathing. They were 7 miles out from Newton when Nora tugged at his coat sleeve. "What is it?" he said. She pointed ahead. "Man," she said. Cole looked. She was right. A rider stopped in the middle of the road a quarter-mile ahead, horse sideways, waiting. Cole slowed the mare and heard the wagon slow behind him. His hand moved to his rifle. The rider raised both hands, palms forward. Cole held still for a moment. Then he recognized the horse, the broad shoulders, the plain coat. He let out a breath that he had been holding without knowing it. Seth Pike. He had gotten ahead of them. Cole did not know how, did not know what roads he had ridden, or how hard he had pushed his horse, but there he sat, blocking the road, hands up, alone. Cole rode forward and pulled up 10 feet away. "You said you'd keep Wes's men off the main road," Cole said. "I did," Pike said. "For a while." He lowered his hands. 3 of them came out of the south road an hour ago. I turned 2 of them back. The third one didn't listen." He looked at Cole steadily. "He's ahead of you. Rode hard for Newton. I don't know if he knows about Croft or if he's just trying to cut you off at the town, but either way, he's ahead." "One man," Cole said. "One man who's been doing Wes's particular kind of work for a long time," Pike said. "Name's Briggs. He's Wes's land agent. He's the one who sat at that kitchen table and watched Daniel Calloway sign the wrong paper." He paused. "He won't stop easy." Cole looked at the road ahead. Behind him, Nell had pulled the wagon up close enough to hear. "There's a way into Newton from the east," Nell said. "Comes in behind the granary. Nobody uses it because the road is terrible. But Croft's farm is south of town, not in it. If you take the east approach and swing wide around Newton entirely, You come out on the south road past the town line. She paused. Briggs will be watching the main approach. You know this road? Cole asked her. I've been going around things I didn't want to walk through for 68 years, Nell said. Yes, I know the road. Cole looked at Pike. You're coming with us, he said. It was not a question. Pike was quiet for a moment. When I filed to be a deputy in this county, he said, I swore an oath to uphold the law, not to uphold Harlan Wes. He looked at his hands on the reins. I've been confusing those two things for long enough. He turned his horse. Lead the way, Mrs. Dawes. Nell led them east off the main road, onto a track that deserved Pike's description of terrible rutted deep and cut across twice by dry creek beds that required the wagon to go slow and careful. Nora sat upright in front of Cole and gripped the horn and did not complain about the jolting, which was considerable. At one point, the wagon lurched hard coming over a rock crossing, and Cole heard Henry make a sharp, unhappy sound. And Nell said something short and precise under her breath and righted the crate with one hand while holding the reins with the other. He all right, Cole called back. He's annoyed, Nell said. He'll live. Nora turned her head to look at the wagon. Henry mad, she said. He's allowed, Cole said. Henry always mad, Nora said with the tone of an older sister who has already formed a complete opinion on the subject. Cole almost smiled. He did not quite, but it was close. They came around the east side of Newton as the afternoon was going long, the town sitting a mile to their west, visible by its roof lines and the water tower and the smoke from the blacksmith's chimney. Cole did not look at the town. He kept his eyes on the road south and let Pike ride point ahead of them and watched the man's posture for any sign that he'd spotted something. The Croft farm came up on the left side of the road 2 miles south of the Newton town line. Cole knew the gate, remembered it from a time he did not discuss with anyone, a low wood gate on iron hinges with no sign on it, because Elias Croft was not a man who needed a sign on his gate to know where he lived. There was a light in the front room window. Good. Cole had needed that to mean something. He pulled up at the gate and got down and helped Nora down, and they went up the path together, Cole with the rag doll under his arm and his hand on Nora's shoulder, Nell behind them with Henry and Pike last walking his horse and leading Cole's mare. Cole knocked on the door. The man who answered was 62 years old and had the look of someone who had spent the last several years intentionally slowing down and found it suited him better than he'd expected. He wore suspenders over a work shirt and no coat, and he had a book in one hand, spine down with his finger keeping the place. He looked at Cole. His expression moved through several things: quickly surprise recognition, and then something more careful that settled over the top of both. Cole Hargrove, Judge Elias Croft said. Elias, Cole said. Croft's eyes moved to Nell, to the bundle in her arms, to Nora standing beside Cole, with her hand wrapped around 2 of his fingers. Then he looked at Pike behind them and the badge on Pike's shirt that Pike had put back on somewhere on the road, and then back at Cole. How much trouble are you bringing to my gate? Croft said. Enough, Cole said. And it's not mine. It belongs to these children. Croft looked at Nora for a long moment. She looked back at him with her mother's direct brown eyes and did not look away, which seemed to settle something in the judge's assessment. He stepped back from the door. Come in, he said. Inside Croft's kitchen table became the place where everything that had been moving for 3 days finally stopped moving long enough to be examined. Cole put the rag doll on the table. Nell sat down with Henry, and Nora pressed herself against Nell's side and watched the adults with the alert, contained attention she had been practicing since she was old enough to understand that adult conversations were important, even when they didn't include you. Open it, Croft said, looking at the doll. Cole took out his knife and cut a careful seam along the bottom of the doll's body. He reached inside and found the paper and pulled it out slowly. It was folded 4 times tight, wrapped in a single layer of oilcloth that had kept it dry and clean. He unfolded it on the table and spread it flat. 3 documents. A loan agreement, handwritten with Daniel Calloway's signature at the bottom, and a date 3 years prior. A second document? The one Wes had shown Ruth with different paper slightly whiter. The ink, a slightly different shade, the terms radically changed. And underneath both of those, a single page in Ruth's own handwriting, small and careful, and clearly written by someone who understood they might not be alive when it was read. Cole read it. Then he pushed it across to Croft. Croft read it without changing his expression, which was the trained response of a man who had been on the federal bench for 20 years and had decided that reacting visibly to things was a luxury he couldn't afford in his professional capacity. He set it down. He picked up the 2 loan documents and held them side by side and turned them toward the lamp. "Different ink," he said. "Different paper," Cole said. "You can see the weight difference if you hold them up." "I can see it," Croft said. "I'm also seeing that the original document has a witness signature on it that the fraudulent one does not." He set them down flat. "Whose signature is that?" "Briggs," Pike said from the doorway. "Wes's land agent. He witnessed the original signing. He knows exactly what Daniel Calloway agreed to and what he didn't." He paused. "And if this goes to federal court, Briggs becomes either a witness for the prosecution or a defendant. My guess is he'll figure that out before we do and make his choice accordingly." Croft looked at Pike. "You're the deputy from Caldwell." "Yes, sir." "You're here voluntarily." "Yes, sir." "You have something in writing about what Wes instructed you to do." Pike reached into his coat and pulled out the paper he'd given Cole on the road, which Cole had given back to him when they stopped to water the horses. He set it on the table beside Ruth's documents. "What he told me this morning," he said, "word for word as best I can reproduce it. Signed and dated." Croft read Pike's account. His expression did not change. But Cole, who had known Elias Croft in another context, in another time, could see the thing happening behind his eyes, the legal mind moving through it, building the structure, checking the corners, finding where it held and where it needed to be reinforced. "This is sufficient for a warrant," Croft said. He said it quietly, not dramatically. The way you say something that is true and does not need amplification. The fraudulent contract is document falsification. Ruth Calloway's written account of the threats she received from Wes's man constitutes evidence of intimidation. Deputy Pike's statement about what Wes said this morning regarding the children, that is a federal matter. He set the papers down. "I will write the warrant tonight. I'll send my writer to the federal marshal's office in Wichita at first light." "Briggs is in Newton," Cole said. "If he knows we're here." "If Briggs came to Newton to cut you off, he doesn't yet know you're at this farm," Croft said. "He knows you were heading for Newton. He doesn't know why, and he doesn't know where specifically." He looked at Cole. "How long before Wes figures out that Pike has turned—" "He'll figure it out when his men report back," Pike said. "Probably by tonight." "Then we have until morning," Croft said. "Possibly less." He stood up and moved to his desk in the adjoining room and came back with paper and pen. "I'm going to write this warrant now, while everything you've told me is precise in my mind. I need each of you to tell me your account in order. Everything you saw, everything you heard, everything you can document." He looked at Cole. "Starting with how you found these children." Cole sat down. He put both hands flat on the table and thought about how to say it, then decided that the plain version was the right version. "I was riding the southern road on accident," he said. "I heard a baby crying from the road. I turned down the Calloway Lane and found a 2-year-old girl sitting on the porch in the morning dew holding a newborn baby against her chest. Their mother was dead inside. No one in Caldwell had come." Croft wrote. The scratch of the pen on paper was the only sound in the room, besides Henry's small breathing and the lamp. Nell told her part. The delivery, Ruth's condition, what Ruth had said in the last hours, the note she had left, who had known and not come. Her voice was steady, all the way through it, the steadiness of a woman who has learned to be useful in the moments when being anything else is a luxury she cannot extend herself. She told it straight, and she told it all. Pike told his part. What Wes had said, when in whose presence. He told it without hedging, and without self-exoneration, which was the right way to tell it, and the harder way. Croft wrote all of it, and then, in the quiet that followed while Croft reviewed what he'd written, Nora slid off Nell's side and walked to the edge of the table and put her small hand on Ruth's letter, the one in her mother's handwriting. She did not pick it up. She just put her hand on it and stood there. Everyone at the table saw her do it, and nobody said anything. Nora looked up at Croft. "Mama, write it," she said. Croft looked at her over his papers. His face was doing something careful. "Yes," he said. "She did." "Mama, keep it safe," Nora said. "She did," Croft said. "She kept it very safe." Nora nodded once, with the gravity of someone confirming a fact they had already decided was important. Then she went back to Nell and leaned against her side and put her thumb in her mouth, which was the first time she had done that since Cole had found her, and which told him more about how hard she had been working to be brave than anything else she had done. Cole looked at the documents on the table. Ruth Calloway's handwriting, small and precise and written in the last weeks of her life, by a woman who knew her time was running short and used what she had left of it to make sure the truth would outlast her. He thought about what Nell had told him, that Ruth had asked if Nora would remember her. He thought about what it cost a person to be that afraid and that clear-headed at the same time. He thought about the woman he had never met, who had hidden the most important thing she had inside the thing her daughter loved most and trusted that someone would find it. He had found it. He had not been supposed to be on that road. But here he was. "Cole," Croft said. He looked up. "The question of guardianship," Croft said. "For the record. These children's father is deceased. Their mother is deceased. There is no documented next of kin. The county will attempt to establish institutional placement the moment Wes has the legal opening to push for it, which will be as soon as he hears that his warrant is being contested by a federal officer." He looked at Cole over his papers. "You indicated to Pike that you intended to claim guardianship." "I did," Cole said. "That is not a small thing," Croft said. "I want to be certain you understand what you're saying in front of a federal officer." "I understand it," Cole said. "Then say it plainly," Croft said. "For the record." Cole looked at Nora against Nell's side with her thumb in her mouth and her mother's eyes half closed with exhaustion. He looked at Henry in the crook of Nell's arm, sleeping again, his dark hair soft against the cloth, his small chest rising and falling, with the reliable determination of something that has decided to keep going. He looked back at Croft. "Their names are Nora Ruth Calloway and Henry Daniel Calloway," he said. "Their mother was Ruth Calloway, who kept them safe until she couldn't, and who trusted that someone would step forward when she couldn't anymore." He paused. "I'm stepping forward. I want that on the record." Croft looked at him for a moment. Then he wrote it down. Outside somewhere on the Newton Road, a horse was moving south at speed. Cole heard it through the window glass, and his hand went still on the table. He listened. The hoofbeats slowed and slowed further, and then turned east off the main road. Not toward the farm. Not yet. But close enough. "They're looking," Pike said from the doorway. He had heard it too. "I know," Cole said. "How many riders did Wes have?" Croft asked without looking up from his writing. "At least 4, Pike said. "Briggs plus 3, possibly more by now if he sent for reinforcements from the county seat." He paused. "Wes has influence in this county that goes a long way in a lot of directions." "His influence ends at the boundary of federal jurisdiction," Croft said. He kept writing. "And I am federal jurisdiction." He set his pen down and looked up, and the expression on his face was the expression of a man who had spent 20 years on the federal bench and had never once in those 20 years lost sight of what the bench was for. "I suggest you both check the property lines and the approaches," he said to Cole and Pike. I'll have this warrant ready within the hour. My rider leaves for Wichita at first light." He picked up his pen again. "Whatever comes down that road tonight, gentlemen, it walks into a federal proceeding the moment it sets foot on this property. I would like you to make that very clear to anyone who needs to hear it." Cole stood up and put on his hat. "Let's go," he said to Pike. Pike followed him to the door. Cole stopped in the doorway and looked back at the table. Nell met his eyes and gave him a single nod that meant she had everything here and he could go. Nora had fallen asleep against Nell's side completely the way children go when the body overrules everything else. Henry breathed. Cole went out into the Kansas night and walked the fence line with Seth Pike beside him and listened to the dark in every direction and waited for whatever was coming to show itself. Behind him in the farmhouse, Elias Croft wrote by lamplight, and the scratching of his pen against the paper was the sound of the law moving slow and certain, like water finding its way to the level it was always meant to reach. The first rider came at 10:30. Cole heard him a full minute before he reached the gate, which was enough time to position himself at the corner of the fence line, where the shadow from the oak tree fell long and dark across the ground. Pike took the other side near the barn, without needing to be told. They had done this kind of work separately before in different counties under different circumstances, and they moved like men who understood the geometry of it, without having to discuss it. The rider stopped at the gate, and did not come through. He sat his horse in the road and looked at the farmhouse and the light in the front window, and then looked along the fence line in both directions. Cole stayed still. Grim, who had followed him from the porch without permission, and whom Cole had decided not to argue with, sat beside him and did not make a sound, which was either remarkable self-control or evidence that the dog had done this kind of thing before too. The rider sat for a long moment. Then he turned his horse and rode back north toward Newton. Cole let out a slow breath. "Scout?" Pike said quietly from across the yard. "He's counting lights. Counting horses at the rail." "I know," Cole said. "They'll be back." "How many horses did you leave at the rail?" "2. Mine and Nell's wagon team." "They'll count 4 people minimum," Pike said. "They know you didn't ride alone." "Let them count," Cole said. "Croft's warrant is written. Pike, what time does your rider leave?" "First light," Croft said from the porch. Cole had not heard him come out. He stood in the doorway with his coat on now and his book gone, which meant he had finished writing and had no intention of going back inside. "Tom will be in the saddle before sunrise. He rides hard. He's in Wichita by mid-afternoon." "And the marshal," Cole said. "Deputy marshals most likely. 2, possibly 3. If I word the request the way I intend to word it, they will not take their time." Croft came down the porch steps and stood in the yard. He looked at the gate at the empty road beyond it. "How many men does Wes have available to him?" "In Caldwell, 4 or 5 he can call on directly," Pike said. "Beyond that, he has relationships with men in 3 counties who've done work for him before. If he telegraphed tonight—" "The telegraph office in Newton closes at 9, Croft said. "If he sent anything, he sent it before then. Anything he sent after that waits until morning." He looked at Cole. "Which means whatever arrives tonight is what he already had moving." "Briggs is in Newton," Cole said. "Yes," Croft said. "And Briggs is the one who knows what's in those documents, which makes him both the most dangerous person Wes can send and the person most likely to consider his own position carefully before he does something that puts him in front of a federal judge." He folded his hands behind his back. "Briggs has been doing Wes's legal work for 8 years. He knows exactly how federal fraud charges work. He knows his name is on the original document. He knows what that means." "You think he'll run?" Pike said. "I think he's been thinking about running for longer than anyone realizes," Croft said. "Men who do what Briggs does generally have an exit calculated before they need it. The question is whether Wes's fear of losing his case outweighs Briggs's fear of being charged as a co-conspirator." He paused. "Those are 2 fears moving in opposite directions. That's an unstable situation." Cole looked at the gate. "What do you need from us tonight?" he said. "Keep them off this property until sunrise," Croft said. "After Tom rides, the warrant is in motion, and anything Wes does to interfere becomes obstruction of a federal proceeding on top of everything else. That's the line. Sunrise." He looked at Cole steadily. "Can you do that?" "Yes," Cole said. Croft went back inside. Pike came across the yard to stand beside Cole at the fence. They stood in the dark together for a moment, without speaking, which was the kind of silence that happens between two men who have just agreed to something they both understand is serious. "You didn't have to do this," Cole said. "Turn on Wes. You could have filed your report last night and kept your head down." "I know," Pike said. "You're going to lose your badge over it," Cole said. "Even if everything goes right, Wes has enough people in the county government that they'll find a reason." "I know that too," Pike said. He was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about something you said. At the Calloway place yesterday morning, you asked me if it sat right with me that the first person to ask about those children's welfare was riding out on Wes's behalf." He paused. "It didn't sit right. It hadn't been sitting right for a while about a number of things. I just kept not looking directly at it." He looked at the gate. "My father was a lawman, 23 years. He used to say, the badge doesn't make you right. It just means you've agreed to be accountable for the difference between right and wrong. You've agreed to notice it." A pause. "I stopped noticing." Cole said nothing. There was nothing to add to that. The second rider came around midnight. This one did not stop at the gate. He came through it at a walk, which was a different kind of statement than stopping at it. Cole stepped out of the shadow when the rider was 10 feet inside the property line. "That's far enough," he said. The rider pulled up. He was a young man, 20s, with the look of someone who had been given a job and was not entirely certain he wanted it, but needed the money more than he needed the certainty. He looked at Cole and at the rifle Cole was holding low at his side and made the rapid assessment of a man calculating risk. "I'm looking for a man named Hargrove," he said. His voice was trying to be harder than it was. "You found him," Cole said. "Mr. Wes wants his property returned," the young man said. He said it the way someone says something they've been told to say without personal investment in its accuracy. "What property?" Cole said. The young man blinked. He had not expected to be asked that. The documents," he said. "And the children." "The children are not property," Cole said. His voice was quiet and completely level. "Say that again to yourself before you repeat it to the man who sent you." He took one step forward. "This is the farm of Judge Elias Croft, who holds a federal commission from the circuit court of this district. Every person on this property is under federal protection as of this evening. Any man who enters this property with intent to remove a person or a document from it is committing a federal offense." He looked at the young man steadily. "You ride back to Newton, and you tell whoever sent you that the warrant was written tonight, and the rider leaves at sunrise, and there is no version of tomorrow that ends well for Harlan Wes. That's the message. You got it." The young man looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at the house. Then he looked back at Cole. "Yes, sir," he said. He turned his horse and rode out. Pike came up beside Cole. "He'll report back to Briggs," he said. "I know," Cole said. "Let him." "You mentioned federal protection pretty confidently," Pike said. "Is that exactly accurate legally?" "Croft said anything that sets foot on this property becomes part of a federal proceeding," Cole said. "I extrapolated." Pike was quiet for a moment. "That's what Pinkerton men do, isn't it?" he said. "Extrapolate." "Among other things," Cole said. They went back to the fence. Inside the house, Nell had made coffee at some point and left it on the stove, which Cole discovered when he came in to check on the children around 1 in the morning. Henry was awake and hungry, and Nell was feeding him with the cloth and the focused efficiency of someone who had made peace with the schedule of a newborn, which was to say she had made peace with the fact that there was no schedule. Nora was deeply asleep on the daybed in Croft's front room, the rag doll tucked against her chest, where Nell had put it after they'd extracted the documents, the doll re-sewn at the bottom, with twine from Croft's kitchen drawer. Cole stood in the doorway and drank his coffee and watched Nora sleep. She was so small. He had understood that academically since he'd found her on the porch, but there were moments in the last 2 days when the competence of her, the seriousness, and the patience, and the willingness to hold on and keep holding, had made him forget how small she actually was. 2 years old. She had spent 3 days alone with a newborn brother and had not fallen apart. She had held on to what she had been trusted with, and she had waited for someone to come. He thought about what that cost. He thought about what it costs a 2-year-old to hold on that hard. He thought about his son, Thomas. He had been 2 years old when the fever came. He did not let himself think about Thomas often, because it did not lead anywhere useful, and it cost him more than he could regularly afford to spend. But standing in the doorway of Elias Croft's front room at 1 in the morning, watching a little girl who was not his, and who needed someone more than she needed anything else in the world, he let himself think about it for a moment. He let himself feel the particular shape of that loss, the precise and irreplaceable weight of it. Then he finished his coffee and went back outside. The third incident happened at 3 in the morning and was not a single rider. Cole heard them coming before he could see them. 4 horses he counted by sound coming down the Newton Road from the north at a pace that was not exploratory. This was not a scout, and this was not a young man with a message. This was something that had been organized and decided and was coming with intention. He stepped to the fence at the gate and waited. Pike came out of the shadow of the barn. The 4 riders pulled up at the gate. Cole could see their faces in the moonlight well enough to identify the one in front, and he had been expecting it. Briggs was a compact man in his 50s, with a face that had the particular quality of someone who spent his time on the sharp side of legal language. Watchful, precise, never entirely at rest. He looked at Cole at the gate, and the look was the look of a man who had run the calculation and had not been satisfied with any of the outcomes, but had come anyway because the alternative was worse. "Hargrove," Briggs said. "Briggs," Cole said. "You have documents that belong to my employer," Briggs said. "I have documents that belong to the estate of Ruth Calloway," Cole said. "The original loan agreement with Daniel Calloway's actual signature on it, which also has your signature on it as witness, as I believe you know." Something moved across Briggs's face. Not guilt. Closer to calculation, the visible kind, when a man is working through something fast and can't hide that he's doing it. Whatever Ruth Calloway believed she had the original, Cole said. "You know she had the original because you were there when Daniel signed it. You know what it says, and you know what the document Wes showed her says, and you know the difference between those two things is the difference between a legal loan agreement and a federal fraud charge." He paused. "Your name is on the original, Briggs, as witness. That means you're either a witness for the prosecution or you're a defendant. Those are the 2 options. The warrant was written tonight, and the rider goes to Wichita at sunrise, and there is no third option." The 4 men sat their horses at the gate. The 3 men behind Briggs were the kind of men who did whatever they were paid to do and had the look of men who had been paid adequately and told this would be straightforward. They were beginning to understand it was not straightforward. Cole could see it in the way they sat, the subtle shift from ready to recalculating. Pike stepped forward out of the shadow of the barn and stood beside Cole at the gate. He was wearing his badge, and he had his hand on his holster, not drawing, just present. The statement of it was clear, without any of them saying it. Briggs looked at Pike for a long moment. Something in his expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough. "You turned," Briggs said to Pike. It was not an accusation. It was more like a man confirming something he had suspected for a while. "I did my job," Pike said. The job I actually swore to do." Briggs looked at the house. He looked at Cole. He sat very still on his horse for a long moment, and Cole could see him working through it, the legal mind that had spent 8 years finding the angles in things, finding the angle in this, and not finding one. "If I were to provide a statement," Briggs said carefully, "a voluntary statement, to the federal officer on this property, detailing the nature of the loan agreements I was asked to prepare and the alterations I was directed to make to them." He stopped. "What would that mean for my position in the federal proceeding?" "That's a question for Judge Croft," Cole said. "Who is inside? Who wrote a warrant tonight? Who has a commission from the Federal Circuit Court?" He held the gate latch. "Come inside, Briggs. Alone. Leave your men at the gate." Briggs did not move for 10 full seconds. Then he dismounted. He handed his reins to the man beside him without speaking, and walked through the gate that Cole opened for him, and Cole walked him up to the house without putting a hand on him, because that was not what this moment required, and Cole knew exactly what each moment required and what it didn't. He knocked twice. Croft opened the door and looked at Briggs and then at Cole. "This is James Briggs," Cole said. "Wes's land agent. He has something he wants to say voluntarily." Croft looked at Briggs for a moment. "Come in," he said. Outside, Pike held the gate and watched the 3 remaining riders, and the 3 riders watched Pike, and nobody moved. Cole stayed on the porch and listened through the window as Croft's pen began to scratch against paper again, and this time the voice giving the account was Briggs's, low and controlled and increasingly specific in the way that the voice of a man gets specific when he has decided that honesty is the best remaining available strategy. It took 45 minutes. When Briggs came out, he looked like a man who had set something down that had been very heavy for a very long time. Not relieved exactly, lighter in the way that's specific to weight that's been carried too long. He walked to the gate. He looked at his 3 men. "Go back to Newton," he said. "Tell whoever asks that I'm cooperating with the federal investigation. Tell Wes." He stopped. He looked at the ground for a moment. "Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him that's the truth, and also tell him it won't change anything I just said inside." The 3 men exchanged looks. Then they rode north without argument, which was what men do when the thing they were paid to enforce has clearly dissolved. Cole watched them go. Briggs stood at the gate and did not follow them. "I have nowhere particular to go tonight," he said. Not asking for sympathy, just stating a fact. "There's coffee on the stove," Cole said. "Croft will tell you what to expect in the morning." Briggs went back inside. Cole stood at the fence alone and looked at the empty road north and felt the night settle around him, the way it settles when something that has been building has finally stopped building and started to resolve. Not finished, not safe, but changed, pointing a different direction than it had been pointing 12 hours ago. Pike came and stood beside him. 4 hours to sunrise, Pike said. "I know," Cole said. They stood in the quiet together for a while. Somewhere in the house, Henry made the small sound he made when he was waking up and working toward hungry, and even from the porch, Cole could hear it. He had been hearing that sound for 3 days, and his body had already learned to register it before his mind caught up with it. He had not expected that. "Your boy," Pike said. He said it quietly. "What was his name?" Cole looked at the road. "Thomas," he said. "How old?" "2," Cole said. "Same as Nora." Pike nodded once and said nothing else, which was the right response, and Cole noted it. Inside, Henry's small sound was getting more insistent. Cole heard Nell's voice, low and soothing, and then the sound settling. He thought about the morning. The rider going to Wichita. The marshal coming south. The warrant and the documents, and Briggs's statement, and Pike's signed account, and Ruth Calloway's letter in her own hand. All of it in Elias Croft's possession. All of it moving through a legal structure that Harlan Wes's money and local influence could not reach. He thought about Ruth hiding that document in the dark hours before her labor started. Alone and frightened, and 8 months along and clear-headed enough to think about where it needed to go and how to get it there. Putting it in the thing her daughter loved most. trusting that love to be the thing that kept it safe. He thought about Nora on the porch with her brother in her arms, saying mama to a stranger, holding on to the only thing she had left and waiting for someone to tell her it was going to be all right. He had told her they were going somewhere safe. He had meant it when he said it. He was beginning to believe it might even be true. "Cole," Pike said. He looked up. The eastern sky had changed barely the faintest possible shift at the horizon, the dark going from solid to merely deep. Not light yet. The promise of it. "Tom's going to be saddling up," Pike said. "I know," Cole said. He straightened up from the fence post and rolled his shoulders back and took a long breath of the Kansas air, which smelled like dry grass and the last of the night, and something that might have been rain coming from the west, which this country needed badly, and which would come when it came regardless of what any of them did. He put his hand on the gate and looked north one more time. The road was empty in both directions. He turned and walked back to the house. Inside, he found Nora awake on the daybed, sitting up straight, the rag doll in her lap, watching the door like she had been waiting for him, specifically to come back through it. When he came in, she looked at him with her mother's brown eyes and said with the flat certainty of a 2-year-old who has decided something is a fact, "Papa Cole, come back." He stopped in the doorway. It was the first time she had called him that. He did not know where she had gotten it from. He did not know if she fully understood what she was saying, or if she had assembled it from the pieces available to her in the way that children assemble the language they need from whatever is around them. He did not know if it was a question or a statement or an observation about something she had already decided. He crossed the room and crouched down in front of her, so his face was level with hers, the same way he had crouched at the bottom of the Callaway porch steps 3 days ago. "Yeah," he said. "I came back." Nora looked at him for a moment. Then she held the rag doll out to him, both arms extended the way she had held Henry out to him on the porch. An offering. A transfer of custody. The thing she trusted most extended to the person she had decided to trust. He took the doll. He held it in both hands and looked at it, the brown yarn hair and the red calico dress and the re-sewn seam at the bottom. He thought about Ruth's hands making it. He thought about what Ruth had put inside it and what that had cost her. He handed it back to Nora gently. "You keep it," he said. "It's yours. Your mama made it for you." Nora pulled it back against her chest. She looked at him. "Mama's safe," she said. He looked at her. The question sat in the air between them, and he understood exactly what she was asking, and understood that there was no answer he could give that was both kind and true, except the one that was the hardest to say. "Your mama is at peace," he said. "She made sure you were safe before she went. That's the bravest thing I've ever heard of anyone doing." He looked at the doll in her arms. "She kept you safe, Nora, right up until the end." Nora was quiet for a moment. She looked at the doll. Then she looked back at him. "Henry's safe," she said. "Henry's safe," he said. "Papa Cole safe," she said. Something moved through his chest that was specific and complete and did not have a name he could put to it in the moment, though he suspected he would understand it better later. "Yeah," he said. "We're all safe." Nora considered this. She seemed to find it acceptable. She lay back down on the daybed and pulled the rag doll against her and closed her eyes with the decisive efficiency of a child who has asked all the questions she needed answers to and is now prepared to sleep. Cole stood up and went to the window and watched the eastern sky go from deep to merely dark to the first gray suggestion of a morning that was finally coming. Behind him, Elias Croft's front door opened and Tom the farmhand came through the kitchen pulling on his coat. He was young, maybe 19, with the lean, focused look of a writer who took his work seriously. He looked at Cole at the window. "Writing now?" Cole asked. "Now," Tom said. Cole reached into his coat and pulled out the folded copy of Croft's warrant request, the one Croft had written a second version of, for exactly this purpose. He held it out. "You put that inside your shirt," he said. "Not in your coat pocket. Inside your shirt." You stop for nothing between here and Wichita except water for the horse." "Yes, sir," Tom said. He took the paper and did exactly what Cole said, tucking it inside his shirt against his chest. "Ride like it matters," Cole said. "It does matter," Tom said, and went out the door. Cole listened to the hoofbeats leave the yard and move north toward the Newton Road, and then turn south, and then grow distant, and then become nothing. He stood at the window and watched the horizon go from gray to pale gold, the Kansas morning arriving the way it always arrived, without ceremony, without permission, just the light coming, because it was time for the light to come. And somewhere 40 miles north of where he stood in the town of Caldwell, Harlan Wess was waking up in his fine house to a morning that was going to be the last ordinary morning he would have for a very long time, and he did not yet know it. The knowing was coming, riding hard from the south, and it would arrive whether he was ready for it or not. The federal deputy marshals arrived at Croft's farm at 2 in the afternoon, not the following evening, as Croft had anticipated, which meant Tom had ridden harder than anyone had asked him to, and the marshal's office had moved faster than anyone had hoped. There were 2 of them, both riding government horses, with the particular no-nonsense efficiency of men who understood that when a sitting federal officer wrote the words urgent and children at risk in the same warrant request, the appropriate response was not to finish lunch first. Croft met them at the gate. Cole stood back and let him. This was Croft's jurisdiction, Croft's proceeding, and Cole understood the difference between the moment when a man needs to lead and the moment when he needs to stand behind the right person and let them. Nell was on the porch with Henry. Nora was beside her, standing straight, watching the strangers with her arms at her sides and the rag doll tucked under one elbow. She had been awake since sunrise, and she had eaten breakfast, and she had asked Cole 3 times when they were going to Caldwell, which had surprised him, until he understood that she had been listening to the adults talk all morning, and had concluded that Caldwell was where the important thing was going to happen. She was not wrong. Croft spoke with the deputies for 10 minutes at the gate. Cole watched the conversation from the porch, reading the shape of it from the gestures and the posture, the way Croft's hand moved when he was laying out a legal structure, and the way the deputies nodded when they were confirming they had authority to act. When Croft turned back toward the house, his face carried the particular quality of controlled satisfaction that belongs to a man who has built a legal case carefully and is about to watch it function. "We ride for Caldwell within the hour," he said. "Both deputies are authorized to execute the warrant. Briggs's statement is entered into the federal record as of this morning. Pike's signed account is Exhibit 2. He looked at Cole. "You'll be asked to give your account in person before the county recorder in Caldwell. Everything you witnessed from the moment you found those children." "I'll give it," Cole said. Croft looked at Nora. "She stays here with Nell until we return," he said quietly. "No," said Nora. Everyone looked at her. She was 2 years old, and she had said it with the flat, uncomplicated authority of someone who had already thought this through and was not interested in being managed. "Nora," Cole said. "I go," Nora said. She looked at him with her mother's eyes. "Mama say tell the truth. I go tell the truth." Cole looked at Croft. Croft looked at Nora. Something moved across the old judge's face that was not quite a smile, but was in that neighborhood. "She's 2 years old," Nell said from behind them, in a tone that indicated she was stating a fact, rather than making an argument. "She's Ruth Calloway's daughter," Cole said quietly. He looked at Nora. "You ride with me. You hold the horn. You don't let go." "I know," Nora said, as if this had never been in question. They rode for Caldwell as the afternoon sun moved west, a party of 7, Cole and Nora, on the gray mare Nell in her wagon, with Henry Croft on his own horse, the 2 federal deputies and Pike, who had put his badge back on that morning and worn it without apology since. Briggs rode at the back, quiet and self-contained, having made his decision the night before, and now living inside it with the resigned steadiness of a man who has stopped running from something, The road north was flat and wide, and Cole watched every approach out of habit and out of the particular alertness that had not left him since he'd found the children 3 days ago, and which he suspected would not leave him for a long time. Nora sat in front of him on the mare and held the saddle horn and did not speak much, which was not like her. He could feel her thinking. Whatever was happening behind those brown eyes, it was serious, and it was hers, and he did not interrupt it. About 12 miles from Caldwell, she said, "Will the bad man go away?" "Yes," Cole said. He said it without hedging because she was not a child who responded to hedging. She responded to the truth which she had earned. "Forever," she said. "For a very long time," Cole said. She thought about this. "Good," she said, and went back to whatever she had been thinking. Caldwell met them the way small towns meet things they have been waiting for, without admitting it, with a stillness that had too much awareness in it to be accidental. People stopped on the boardwalk. Conversations paused mid-sentence. A woman Cole had never met and would never know the name of stood in the doorway of the dry goods store and watched them ride through with an expression that had enough layers of guilt and relief in it to keep a person busy sorting them out for a while. Harlan Wess was not at his grain warehouse office when they arrived. His clerk, a young man named Patterson, who had clearly been expecting something like this for longer than he would ever admit, told them with visible relief that Mr. Wess was at his home on Birch Street. Croft thanked him and turned to the deputies, and the party moved to Birch Street. The Wess house was the finest in Caldwell, which in 1883 meant it had a proper porch with columns and glass windows on the upper floor, and a fence with iron pickets that had been shipped from back east at considerable expense. Cole looked at it and thought about the Callaway farmhouse with its plain porch and its open door, and the 2 children who had been left in it with nobody coming. Then he stopped thinking about it and focused on what was in front of him. Croft knocked. The man who answered was not Wess. It was a woman in her 40s housekeeper, by the look of her, who took one look at the 2 federal deputies and the judge and the party behind them and went white around the mouth and said, "I'll get him," and disappeared before anyone said another word. Wess took 4 minutes to come to the door. Cole timed it. 4 minutes was enough time to burn documents, but not enough time to burn the right ones if you didn't know which ones were already in federal hands, which Wess didn't know precisely. 4 minutes was enough time to compose yourself, which was what Wess had used it for. He came to the door, dressed and groomed, and carrying himself with the kind of controlled authority that had been effective for 20 years and was going to stop being effective in approximately the next 30 seconds. He looked at Croft first, then at the deputies, then at Pike, who held his gaze without flinching. Then his eyes moved past all of them and found Cole, and behind Cole on the mare. Nora sitting straight, with her hand on the horn and her brown eyes looking at Harlan Wess with an attention that was perfectly clear and perfectly calm. Something happened in Wess's face when he saw her. Cole watched it happen. It was not guilt, not exactly, not the guilt of a man who regrets what he did. It was closer to the particular discomfort of a man who had arranged things so he would not have to look at the consequence of what he had done, and who was now being required to look at it directly in the form of a 2-year-old girl on a horse with her dead mother's eyes. He recovered fast. Men like Wess always did. "Judge Croft," he said. "This is unexpected." "Mr. Wess," Croft said, "I have a federal warrant for your arrest on charges of document falsification fraud and criminal conspiracy." He held the warrant out. "You may read it at whatever pace you like." Wess looked at the paper. He did not take it immediately. He looked at Briggs, who was at the back of the party on his horse, and who met Wess's eyes for exactly 1 second before looking away. That 1 second told Wess everything he needed to know about how the proceeding had been structured. Cole could see him calculating. Could see the calculation arrive at its conclusion. Could see the conclusion land. He took the warrant and read it. The street around them was not empty. It had been empty when they rode in. It was not empty now. People had drifted to doorways and the edges of the boardwalk the way people do when something important is happening, and they understand they are witnessing it. Cole noted this not with satisfaction, but with the professional awareness of a man who understood that witnesses matter. Wes read the warrant. He handed it back to Croft. His hands were steady, which cost him something. Cole could see that it cost him something, but he was not going to give them unsteady hands. That much pride he was holding on to. "I'll need my lawyer," Wes said. "That is your right," Croft said. "Deputy." The deputy moved forward with the irons. Wes looked at them, and looked at the street around him, at the people in doorways, and on the boardwalk at the town he had built himself into the center of over 20 years of careful accumulation. He looked at all of it with the eyes of a man who is understanding in real time that the thing he built was not what he thought it was, or rather was exactly what it was, and the accounting had arrived. He put his hands out for the irons. He did not speak again. He walked out of his own house, onto his own porch, and down his own iron-fenced path, with the two federal deputies beside him, and the people in doorways watched him go, and the street was very quiet, in the way streets go quiet when something that has been wrong for a long time has just been made right. Cole watched him go. He felt Nora watching too. He glanced down at her. Her expression was not triumphant. It was not angry. It was the expression of a child who has been waiting for something to happen, and has just watched it happen, and is deciding what it means. "He go away now?" Nora said. "He goes away now?" Cole said. Nora looked at the space where Wes had been standing. Then she looked at the rag doll tucked under her elbow. Then she looked up at Cole. "Good," she said. The same word she had used on the road. Quiet and certain and complete. The next 2 hours were the business of law, which is less dramatic than the events that require it, but more important than almost anything else. Croft and the deputies took Wes to the county recorder's office, which was located in a building that Wes did not own, which was not an accident on Croft's part. Cole gave his account to the county recorder, a thin, careful man named Aldridge, who wrote everything down in a hand that was small and precise and clearly belonged to someone who understood that what he was writing was going to matter for a long time. Cole told it from the beginning. The road he wasn't supposed to be on. The crying he heard before he saw the house. The porch. Nora with Henry in her arms. He told it plainly, the way you tell things when you understand that plainness is the only appropriate register. He told about the doll and the documents. He told about Nell and what Nell had told him, and what Ruth had said in her last hours. He told it all. Aldridge wrote it all. When he was done, Aldridge looked up from his paper and said, "Mr. Hargrove, for the record, you had no prior relationship with the Calloway family before the morning of June the 9th. "No," Cole said. "And you acted on their behalf voluntarily, without compensation or prior obligation." "Yes," Cole said. Aldridge looked at him for a moment with an expression that was professionally neutral and humanly something else. "Thank you," he said. Then he went back to his paperwork, because that was his job and he was doing it. Pike gave his account in the same office afterward, and it took longer because Pike's account covered more ground, 6 years of ground, and he told it all, including the parts that were not easy and that put him in a light that was not flattering. He did not edit himself. Cole stood in the doorway and listened to him do it, and thought about what it costs a person to tell the truth backward, to take apart the story you've been telling yourself, and put it down in front of a recorder, and say, "Here is what I did, and here is what it was." It costs a great deal. Pike paid it without bargaining. Nell had taken the children to the county recorder's waiting room, a small plain space with a bench along one wall, while the legal work was being done. When Cole came out, he found Nora sitting on the bench next to Nell with Henry in her lap. She was holding him the way her mother had held him, both arms careful and straight. His head supported her whole small body, organized around the task of keeping him secure. She was singing, very quietly. Something without words, just a tune low and repetitive, the kind of thing a mother sings without thinking about it, because it's been sung to her and it lives in her body, the way language lives below thought. Cole stood in the doorway and did not move. Henry's eyes were open. He was looking at Nora's face with the unfocused attention of a 5-day-old who cannot yet see clearly, but can locate warmth and sound and presence. His small hands were loose at his sides, the hands of a baby who is not afraid, who has been held enough in his short life to know that held is where he is supposed to be. Nell looked up and saw Cole in the doorway, and looked back down at the children and said nothing, which was the right thing. Cole went in and sat on the bench on the other side of Nora. She did not stop singing. She glanced at him once, confirming his presence, and then looked back at Henry and kept singing. And Cole sat beside her and let the song fill the small room and thought about Ruth Calloway, who had given her daughter this song along with everything else, and who had trusted it to outlast her. It had. They stayed in Caldwell that night, all of them at the boarding house on the main street that had 3 rooms available, and a proprietor who fed them without asking questions, which Cole appreciated more than he said. Nora slept between him and Nell on the wide bed in the largest room, with Henry in the wooden dresser drawer they had lined with blankets, because it was the right size and shape, and Nell had done this particular improvisation before. Cole slept in the chair, or tried to. He mostly sat in it. Around midnight, Nora woke and reached for him in the dark, without opening her eyes. Just put her hand out and felt for him the way she had felt for the saddle horn on the horse, locating the available, reliable thing and holding it. He took her hand. She went back to sleep. He sat in the chair with her hand in his and listened to Henry breathe and looked at the dark ceiling and thought about the 40 miles they had traveled and the 3 days before that and the road he had not been supposed to be on. He thought about the gray mare stopping without being asked. He thought about a crying he had heard from the road and a choice he had made before he fully understood he was making it. He did not believe in accidents exactly. He had stopped believing in them 15 years ago, when he had spent enough time watching the shape of events to understand that most things that looked accidental were the result of 100 small decisions made by 100 different people that converged into something that looked random from inside it. Ruth hiding the document. Nell leaving the note. Pike spending the night deciding. Tom riding hard. Croft riding fast. All of it converging on a porch in Caldwell, where a 2-year-old had been sitting in the morning dew holding her brother and waiting for someone. He had been the someone. That was the part he was still working out. In the morning, Croft came to the boarding house for breakfast and sat across from Cole with coffee and the particular expression of a man who has done what he set out to do and is taking a moment to confirm it. "Wes is in federal custody," Croft said. "He'll be transferred to Wichita for arraignment within the week." Briggs's statement and Pike's account are both entered. The original loan agreement is entered. Ruth Calloway's letter is entered. He paused. "This will go to trial. It will take time, but it is in motion and it will not stop." "The farm," Cole said. "The Calloway property is frozen pending the fraud adjudication," Croft said. "No one can claim it, sell it, or transfer it while the federal case is active. When the case concludes, and it will conclude in one direction, the property returns to the estate." He looked at Cole. "Which means it returns to the children." "How long?" Cole asked. "A year, possibly more." Croft wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. "The children need somewhere to be in the meantime." "They have somewhere to be," Cole said. Croft looked at him. "Your guardianship claim is in the record. I filed it last night with the county recorder under federal commission. That means it is not a county document that Wes's remaining allies can touch. It is federal." He paused. "You understand what I'm telling you?" "Yes," Cole said. "It means until that court proceeding concludes, and most likely after it, you are the legal guardian of Nora Ruth Calloway and Henry Daniel Calloway." Croft said it plainly, the way he said all important things. "That is not a temporary arrangement unless you make it one." "I'm not making it one," Cole said. Croft looked at him for a long moment, the measuring look of a man who has spent decades on the bench evaluating whether people mean what they say and has gotten very good at it. Whatever he saw in Cole's face, it satisfied him. He picked up his coffee. "There is one more thing," Croft said. He reached into his coat and produced a folded paper. Ruth Calloway's letter, the one she wrote before Henry was born. He set it on the table between them. "I kept a copy for the federal record. This is the original. It belongs to those children." He paused. "When they're old enough." Cole looked at the paper. He thought about Ruth writing it. He thought about what it had cost her and what she had intended it to do. He picked it up carefully and folded it and put it in his inside coat pocket against his chest, next to where the rag doll had rested on the ride south. "Thank you, Elias," he said. Croft picked up his coffee cup and looked at the window. "Don't thank me," he said. "Do something useful with it." They left Caldwell that morning, the four of them, Cole and Nora and Nell, in her wagon with Henry heading north on the road toward the cabin 12 miles out. The same road Cole had ridden south on 3 days ago, now running in the other direction, which changed the look of it considerably. The Kansas grassland went wide on all sides, brown and August dry and vast, in the way that this particular piece of the country is vast without apology, without ornament. Just the land going as far as you could see, and then going further. Nora rode in front of Cole on the gray mare and held the horn with both hands and watched the road ahead with the forward-facing attention she had been practicing since she was old enough to practice anything. After a while she said, "Is the house big?" "Not very," Cole said. "It's enough." "Is there a garden?" "There is. It needs work." "I help," Nora said immediately. "I figured you'd say that," Cole said. "Henry helped too," Nora said in the tone of someone already delegating. "Henry's 5 days old," Cole said. "He can learn," Nora said with the decisive confidence of an older sister who has already made up her mind about her brother's potential. Cole said nothing to that. He looked at the road ahead and felt something in his chest that he had not felt in 6 years. Something he did not try to name, because naming it felt like it might disturb it, might make it aware of itself and cause it to recede. He left it alone and let it be what it was. It was enough to feel it. It had been a long time since it had been there to feel. They reached the cabin in the early afternoon. Cole got Nora down from the mare, and she stood in the yard and looked at the cabin, and looked at the garden, and looked at the well, and made her assessment with the concentrated seriousness she brought to most things. "It needs work," she said about the garden. "I know," Cole said. "We start today," she said. "We start today," he agreed. Nell pulled the wagon into the yard and set the brake and sat for a moment looking at the cabin with Henry in the crook of her arm. She had that expression she wore when she had come to a decision about something but was taking her time saying it. Cole knew the expression by now. "I'll be needing somewhere to stay," she said, "while the work is happening. My place is 7 miles east, and that's a long way to ride for someone who has reading to supervise, and a garden that needs watching, and a newborn who still doesn't have a reliable schedule." "There's a back room," Cole said. "I'll need a proper chair," Nell said. "I'll get you a chair," Cole said. "And I'll need books," she said. "I have opinions about which ones." "I don't doubt that," Cole said. Nell looked at him with her one good eye, and the expression shifted into something that was as close to warm as Nell Dawes allowed herself in public. "You did a good thing, Cole Hargrove," she said, "on a road you weren't supposed to be on." "Somebody had to," Cole said. "Somebody always has to," Nell said. "The difference is whether that somebody shows up." She got carefully down from the wagon with Henry against her chest. "Most people don't." Cole watched her carry Henry toward the porch and thought about that. About the people who had ridden past the Calloway house. The neighbors who had heard things and decided it was not their business. The town that had organized itself around a powerful man and called it civilization. He thought about it without bitterness, because bitterness was not useful, and he had decided a long time ago to spend his energy only on what was useful. What was useful right now was the garden and the well and the back room that needed a chair and a 5-day-old boy who was going to need to be fed again within the hour, and a 2-year-old girl who was already on her knees in the garden examining the bean rows with the focused attention of someone conducting a professional assessment. He put his horse away and came back out to the yard and went to the garden and crouched beside Nora and looked at what she was looking at. "These ones are okay," she said, pointing to the bean row. "These ones need water." She pointed to the tomato plants at the far end. "And these ones need to be talked to." "Talked to?" Cole said. "Mama talked to her plants," Nora said with complete seriousness. "They grew better." Cole looked at the tomato plants. They were struggling in the way that things struggle when they have been without attention for too long, but have not given up entirely. "All right," he said. "What did your mama say to them?" Nora thought about it. "She said, 'I see you. Keep going.'" Cole looked at the plants. He looked at the flat Kansas sky above them, enormous, and indifferent, and beautiful, the way enormous, indifferent things can be when you're standing under them, and still alive. He looked at Nora beside him, with dirt on her knees, and her rag doll propped against a fence post, where she could see it. He put his hand on the dry earth beside the tomato plants. "I see you," he said quietly. "Keep going." Nora nodded with satisfaction. She stood up and brushed her knees off and went to get the water bucket from the well, because that was the next practical step, and she was a child who understood practical steps and took them without being asked. Cole stayed crouched in the garden for a moment longer. He thought about Ruth Calloway, who had held on to the truth when holding on to it was the most dangerous and most exhausting thing she could have done. Who had put it somewhere safe and trusted it to outlast her? Who had been right? He thought about Thomas, 2 years old, and the shape of that loss, and how he had been carrying it for 6 years like a stone in a coat pocket, feeling the weight of it every time he moved, and how it had never gotten lighter. But how standing in this yard, with this garden, and these children, and this woman who had delivered 400 babies and needed a proper chair, and had opinions about books standing here, it fit differently. Not lighter, differently. Like something that belonged to him rather than something that had happened to him. He stood up. He went to help Nora with the water bucket, which was too heavy for her alone, and she accepted the help without comment, because she had already identified it as necessary, and the point was the garden, not the independence. They watered the tomatoes together, the man and the 2-year-old going back and forth from the well to the garden, while the Kansas afternoon light went long and gold across the yard, and Henry slept inside, and Nell sat in whatever chair she had found, and Grim lay on the porch, watching the yard with the dignified attention of a dog who has decided this is where he is supposed to be. That evening, after Nora was asleep and Henry had been fed and put down in the crate beside the stove, Cole sat at the kitchen table with Nell and the lamp between them, and he took Ruth's letter out of his coat pocket and set it on the table. He did not open it. He just looked at it for a moment. "She trusted the right person," Nell said. She was not looking at the letter. She was looking at her hands. "She trusted the doll," Cole said. "She trusted her daughter," Nell said. "And she was right about that too." Cole put his hand on the letter. He would read it someday when Nora was old enough to hear it, and he would sit beside her when she read it for the first time, and he would answer whatever she needed answered, and hold whatever she needed held. That was what it was for. It was not for tonight. Tonight, it was enough to know it existed, that Ruth had written it, that the truth was in it, and the truth was safe. He put the letter back in his coat. Outside, the Kansas dark was clean and full of the small sounds that belonged to it, the grass and the wind, and somewhere far to the west, the first low rumble of a storm that might bring rain by morning, which this land needed, and which would come when it came indifferent to anyone's plans, carrying nothing but water and the particular smell of the world, deciding to be generous for a while. 3 weeks later, Harlan Wess stood before a federal circuit court in Wichita and heard 14 counts of fraud and document falsification read aloud in a room full of people who had believed him for 20 years. James Briggs testified for 4 hours. Seth Pike testified for 2. The Callaway loan documents were entered into evidence, and the handwriting expert Croft had arranged confirmed what anyone who held both documents up to the light could see, that one of them had been altered after the fact, carefully, by someone who believed it would never be examined closely. The jury took 3 hours. 11 families in Caldwell County received legal acknowledgement that they had been defrauded. 7 of them recovered property. The others received documentation that what had happened to them was real and wrong, and on the record, which was not enough, but was not nothing, and was more than they had before. The Callaway farm was returned to its rightful estate in the spring of the following year, and the county recorder filed the title in the names of Nora Ruth Callaway and Henry Daniel Callaway minors under the legal guardianship of Cole Hargrove of Caldwell County, Kansas. It was the only document in Cole's personal records that he kept in the front of the drawer rather than the back. Nora was 3 years old by then. She remembered the trial, or said she did, though what she remembered most clearly was not Wes in the courtroom or the reading of the verdict, but Cole's hand holding hers in the gallery, and Nell sitting on her other side, smelling like lavender, and the sound of the judge's voice, which was slow and serious, and certain in the way that she had decided all important voices should be. Henry remembered nothing of it being 6 months old at the time, which was appropriate. He would learn it later, the way children learn the things that shaped them before they were old enough to know they were being shaped. He would learn it from Cole, who told it plainly, from Nell, who told it with corrections and editorial opinions at every turn, and eventually from Ruth's letter, which Cole read to both children on a Thursday evening in October, when Nora was 7 and Henry was 5, sitting on the porch of the cabin, with the Kansas sky going orange above them, and Grim asleep in the yard. Nora did not cry when she heard it. She sat very still and listened, and when it was done, she held out her hand for the letter and read it again herself, slowly moving her finger along the lines, the way Nell had taught her to do when she was working through something carefully. She folded it when she was done and held it in her lap and looked out at the yard. She knew, Nora said. She made sure. She did, Cole said. She knew you'd come, Nora said. Cole looked at the yard, at the garden that had grown considerably in 2 years, at the well, at the gray mare in the lean-to, who was now officially named Tuesday, for reasons Nora had explained once with complete logic that Cole had never been able to fully reproduce. I don't know if she knew that specifically, he said. I think she knew that somebody would. She trusted that somebody would. Nora thought about that. That's the same thing, she said. Cole looked at her. 7 years old, sitting on the porch with her mother's letter in her lap, and her mother's eyes looking at the horizon with her mother's particular quality of certainty. Yeah, he said. Maybe it is. Henry leaned against Cole's side, 5 years old, and already showing the particular stubbornness that Nell said came from both his parents in equal measure, and said, "Can we eat now?" which broke the solemnity of the moment cleanly and appropriately, because that was what 5-year-olds were for. Nora laughed, short and genuine, the way she had always laughed, the way she had laughed for the first time in a barn outside Newton, when they thought the riders were coming, and they turned out to be homesteaders going fast. Cole had heard her laugh a great many times since then, and it had never stopped doing what it did to something in his chest. Loosening it the way a thing loosens when it has been held tight for too long and has finally been given permission to let go. They went inside. Ruth Callaway had died on a Tuesday morning 3 days after her son came into the world, in a house on the edge of Caldwell, Kansas, with the truth she had been keeping safe, still hidden where she had put it, still waiting. She had been 29 years old. She had been frightened, and she had been clear-headed, and she had done the bravest thing available to her with the time she had left. And she had been right to do it, and she had been right about the kind of person who would find it. She had trusted the world to produce one person willing to turn down the right road at the right moment. The world had. And the children she had kept safe were kept safe still, and the truth she had hidden had seen the light, and her name was in the federal record, not as a victim, but as the woman who had broken Harlan West before he even knew he was broken in the quiet dark of her own kitchen 8 months along and afraid and absolutely certain about what mattered. She had not been wrong about any of it. Not once. That was Ruth Calloway. And that was enough. That was everything.